Have you ever sat at a holiday dinner and watched your own mother hand your business proposal to your brother, the one you spent 3 months writing, and heard her say, "Sweetheart, leave the big decisions to the men"? That's exactly what happened to me last Thanksgiving. In front of 14 relatives, my mother stood up, clinked her wine glass, and announced that my brother Derek would be taking over as co-owner of our family's restaurant chain. The same chain I had quietly kept from bankruptcy twice in 4 years. She looked at me across the table and said I was welcome to stay on as support staff. So I smiled, set down my fork, and walked out. What none of them knew was that I had already spent 6 months building the case that would take everything from them. Not out of spite, out of necessity. My name is Claire Harmon, and this is how I saved a 30-year-old business by dismantling the lie it was built on. Harmon Kitchen Group started as a single diner in Columbus, Ohio, in 1993. My grandmother Loretta opened it with $18,000 she'd saved from 20 years of nursing shifts. By the time I was born, there were 3 locations. By the time I graduated from Ohio State with a degree in hospitality management and a minor in accounting, there were 9. The brand had real value. Loyal regulars, a catering arm, a commissary kitchen that supplied 4 local school districts. It wasn't glamorous, but it was solid. And it was hers, my grandmother's, in every way that mattered. My mother joined the business by marrying into it. My grandmother never said that out loud, but you could hear it in the pauses when she talked about the early days. My mother was efficient, organized, and good at appearances. She redesigned the dining rooms, fired 3 general managers who'd been loyal to my grandmother for a decade, and installed my brother Derek as regional director at 26, despite the fact that Derek's most notable professional achievement at that point was managing a fantasy football league. I started at the bottom, not because I was asked to, but because I wanted to understand every part of the operation. I bussed tables at the Clintonville location on weekends during college. I learned the POS system, the vendor contracts, the health code requirements. After graduation, I joined full-time as an operations coordinator and worked my way up to director of finance over 5 years. My salary never reflected my actual responsibilities. My mother explained that family businesses operated differently. "We were all in it together," she said. "We all made sacrifices." Derek's sacrifices were mostly invisible. He had the title of regional director, a company truck, and an expense account that I audited quarterly and never once asked about aloud. His meetings ended at 2 in the afternoon. He attended food expos in Las Vegas and Nashville and filed the trips as market research. The receipts told a different story. Steakhouses, nightclubs, 2 charges from a place in Nashville that came up as a luxury car rental when I Googled the address. I noted it. I said nothing. I kept working. The first real crisis came in 2021. Our primary food distributor renegotiated our contract during the supply chain disruptions, and the new pricing would have added $340,000 annually to our operating costs. My mother's solution was to raise menu prices across the board and absorb the PR hit. Derek suggested cutting the school district contracts, which were lower margin but critical to our community reputation. I spent 11 days renegotiating directly with 3 competing distributors, building a blended sourcing model that reduced the impact to $60,000 per year. My mother presented the solution to the board, a small family board that included 2 of her sisters as a collaborative effort. Derek got mentioned by name. I was thanked as part of the finance team. I kept a folder on my personal laptop. Nothing dramatic. Just dates, dollar amounts, decisions I'd made that were attributed to others. I wasn't planning anything then. I was just tired of gaslit memory, of being told that I'd misremembered who had done what. The folder was proof for myself, not ammunition. Not yet. The second crisis was worse. In early 2023, I discovered during a routine reconciliation that $180,000 had moved out of the operating reserve over 8 months, in increments small enough to avoid automatic flagging. The transfers went to a vendor account I didn't recognize. I traced it to an LLC registered in Delaware, Pinnacle Food Concepts. I ran the registration number. The registered agent was a name I didn't know, but the business address was a mailbox service 2 miles from our main office. I cross-referenced Derek's expense reports. 3 of the charges that had seemed vague: consulting fees, development costs, strategic partnership deposit, matched the transfer dates almost exactly. I didn't confront anyone. I opened a second folder. My grandmother called me that April, which was unusual because she called my mother for business and me for everything else. She was 81 and still sharp in a way that made her doctors vaguely nervous. She asked me to visit her at the house in Bexley, not the assisted living facility she refused to move into, but her own home with the blue shutters and the herb garden she'd maintained for 40 years. We sat on her back porch, and she poured me coffee and didn't say anything for a while. Then she slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a document I'd never seen, a shareholder agreement she'd drawn up in 2018 and had notarized separately from the standard business filings. It established that the original founding shares, 30% of the company, were held in a restricted trust in my name, not my mother's, not Derek's, mine. She'd done it quietly, she explained, because she didn't trust what would happen to the business otherwise. She'd seen how my mother managed things. She'd seen Derek, and she'd seen me, year after year, carrying weight that no one acknowledged. She said she'd been watching, and she was sorry it had taken her this long to say it plainly. She told me the document was filed with her attorney, a woman named Patricia Cole at a firm in Upper Arlington, and that Patricia had been expecting my call for 3 years. I drove home and sat in my car in my apartment parking lot for 20 minutes. Then I called Patricia. She answered on the second ring. She told me my grandmother had retained her in 2018 with specific instructions. Wait for Claire to come. Don't reach out first. Loretta believed I would know when the time was right, and she believed I would come prepared. Patricia had been monitoring the company's public filings and was aware of several anomalies. She asked if I had documentation. I told her I had 2 folders. She said to bring everything. Thanksgiving came before I was ready, but moments like that rarely wait for your schedule to clear. My mother had reserved the private room at a restaurant in Dublin, ironic, holding a Harmon kitchen group dinner somewhere else, but she liked the aesthetic. 12 family members, 2 of my mother's friends who always showed up to these things, Derek's girlfriend, and me. The turkey was carved, the wine was poured. My mother stood up. She talked about legacy and growth, and the next chapter of the family business. She talked about Derek's vision and his leadership, and the relationships he'd been building in the industry. Then she talked about the importance of everyone knowing their role. She looked at me when she said it. Not in a cruel way. In a way that was somehow worse, gentle, and certain. The way you talk to someone you've already decided about. She announced that Derek would be elevated to President of Operations, effective January 1st. She announced that my role would be restructured to administrative oversight, essentially a bookkeeper with a fancy title. She said she hoped I understood that this was about playing to everyone's strengths. She said it with a smile that had been practiced in mirrors. Derek raised his glass. 14 people raised theirs. Mine stayed on the table. I waited for the moment to pass. I waited for the conversation to move on to other things, for someone to ask about someone's kids or complain about the drive-in from Westerville. Then I folded my napkin, set it beside my plate, and spoke quietly to my mother. I told her I needed some air. She nodded, distracted. I picked up my bag and walked out. I sat in my car and called Patricia. It was a Thursday. The next board meeting was scheduled for the following Monday. I told her it was time. She said she'd be there. My brother called twice before I reached the highway. I let it ring. My mother texted, "Don't be dramatic, come back inside." I turned off the notification and drove to my apartment, where I opened both folders and started organizing everything into the structure Patricia and I had built over the past 7 months. The weekend passed in a controlled silence. My phone accumulated 41 missed calls and a string of texts that escalated from confused to annoyed to something close to worried. Derek left a voicemail saying I was embarrassing the family and that Dad, our stepfather, who had nothing to do with the business and knew it, was upset. My mother sent a formal email Saturday night, in her capacity as CEO, informing me that my failure to appear for a scheduled Monday presentation would be considered job abandonment. I didn't respond to any of it. I had my own meeting Monday morning. Patricia's office was on the fourth floor of a building in Upper Arlington, with a view of nothing particularly interesting and a conference table that could seat 12. She had 2 associates with her, a forensic accountant named James, who'd been working with us for 2 months, and a woman from the Ohio Attorney General's office who Patricia introduced simply as a resource, which told me everything I needed to know. We went through the evidence one last time, the $180,000 in diverted funds, the Pinnacle Food Concepts LLC, and its connection to Derek's expense account, 3 falsified invoices that James had identified as structurally identical, same font, same formatting, different vendor names, as if they'd been generated from the same template. A chain of text messages Derek had sent to a contact, simply saved as P, discussing moving money before the quarterly review. The messages had come from a company phone. Company phones were backed up to the server I administered. Patricia looked at everything and said, "This is enough. More than enough." At 11 o'clock, we walked into the Harmon Kitchen Group board meeting. The room went quiet in the specific way. Rooms go quiet when something has already gone wrong, and everyone is only now realizing it. My mother sat at the head of the table. Derek was beside her, a new notepad in front of him, still in the packaging. 2 of my aunts occupied the remaining board seats. A man I recognized as the company's outside counsel sat to my mother's left, which told me someone had thought to call him, which meant someone had been nervous. My mother's first words were directed at me. "This is a closed meeting." Patricia stepped forward and introduced herself. She placed a document on the table, a formal notice from Patricia's firm acting on behalf of the Loretta Harmon Founding Trust, asserting shareholder rights, and requesting an immediate review of recent financial disclosures. She placed a second document beside it, a formal complaint filed with the Ohio Secretary of State's office, citing potential securities irregularities in a privately held entity. The outside counsel picked up both documents and read them without expression, which meant he was very carefully composing his expression. Derek said, "What is this?" Not a question, just words. Patricia said, "This is a shareholder action, Mr. Harmon. Your sister holds 30% of this company through a restricted trust established by its founder. That interest has never been disclosed in your internal governance documents, which is itself a compliance issue. But we're here today primarily because of what was done with the company's operating reserve." James opened his laptop and connected to the room's display. The first slide showed a clean timeline, 8 months, 16 transfers, $180,000, moving from the operating reserve to Pinnacle Food Concepts LLC. The second slide showed the LLC registration, the Delaware filing, the mailbox address. The third slide showed the invoices, side by side, with a red outline around the repeated structural elements. The fourth slide showed Derek's expense reports, the matching dates, the consulting fees. One of my aunts, my mother's younger sister Carol, said, "Derek, what is that?" Derek looked at my mother. My mother looked at the outside counsel. The outside counsel looked at the documents. Derek said, "Those are legitimate business expenses." Patricia said, "The vendor doesn't exist. The tax ID on the invoices belongs to a dissolved restaurant supply company in Michigan. The funds went to an account connected to a personal LLC registered under a name associated with your prior address. We have the documentation." The room was very still. My mother turned to me. Her voice was controlled in the way that costs a lot of energy to maintain. She said, "You did this." I said, "I documented what was already there. You made the decision to restructure my role out of the company's real operations. I made the decision to protect my grandmother's investment." She said, "This is family." I said, "Yes, which is why I gave you every opportunity to run it honestly." Carol asked to see the full documentation. The outside counsel said he needed to speak to my mother privately. Derek stood up and said this was a setup. that I had always been threatened by him, that grandmother had always favored me unfairly. He said it loudly and with conviction, and I recognized the performance because I had watched him perform it my entire life, the aggrieved golden child, wronged by circumstance, let down by everyone else's failure to appreciate him. Then James showed the text messages. Derek's name at the top of the screen, the contact saved as P, the message thread that included the phrase, "Just push it through before Claire catches the quarterly numbers. Move it the same way as last time." The last time. I hadn't known there was a last time. James had found it. An additional $47,000 from 14 months earlier, before I'd started watching as closely. Same structure. Different amount. Derek sat down. Carol said, "I vote to suspend Derek's authority pending a full audit." Her other sister, my Aunt Renee, looked at my mother for a long moment and then said, "Seconded." My mother didn't vote. She stared at the table. The outside counsel said, quietly, that he would recommend the company cooperate fully with any investigation and that Derek should retain personal counsel before saying anything further. Derek looked at his phone, then at the door, then at nothing in particular. I had not planned the next part, or maybe I had without knowing it. I placed the original shareholder document on the table, the one my grandmother had left me, the one Patricia had filed in 2018 and kept sealed until now. I slid it to the center where everyone could see it. I said, "Loretta Harmon built this company on 30 years of 6 a.m. shifts and vendor negotiations and knowing every employee's name and their kids' names. She left me this because she wanted it protected. I'm not here to take anything from anyone. I'm here because someone already took something, and I'm the only one who noticed." Carol asked what I wanted. I said, "An independent audit, transparent governance, a board structure that includes outside oversight, and the restoration of my actual role, with compensation that reflects what I've been doing for the past 5 years." My mother finally looked up. She seemed smaller than she had an hour ago, which was disorienting because she had always seemed very large in every room she entered. She said, "You could have come to me." I said, "I came to you in 2021, when the distributor contract nearly broke us. I came to you in 2022, when the commissary numbers were off. I came to you every time, and every time, you thanked Derek." She didn't answer that. The audit took 6 weeks. The forensic accounting firm Patricia retained separate from James, for independents found $227,000 in total diverted funds across 22 months. They found 3 additional invoices, with the same fabricated vendor structure. They found that Pinnacle Food Concepts LLC had been used to pay for Derek's apartment deposit, 2 car payments, and a trip to Scottsdale that overlapped with the Nashville market research expense I'd flagged years earlier and never pursued. Derek's attorney negotiated a repayment agreement and a cooperation deal with the county prosecutor's office. He resigned from the company and surrendered his title. The repayment terms required monthly installments over 4 years. His girlfriend moved out before the audit was complete. He relocated to Arizona, which I learned secondhand from Carol. The outside counsel resigned his retainer. My mother retained a new firm one, with no personal history with our family. 3 employees reached out to me privately during the audit process. A general manager who had been pressured to sign off on vendor payments without reviewing them. A bookkeeper who had flagged a discrepancy 2 years ago and been told she was mistaken. A catering coordinator who had documented a pattern of expense report irregularities and kept her notes in a desk drawer because she didn't know who to give them to. I gave all 3 of them Patricia's contact information. Their accounts corroborated everything. The board was restructured. 2 independent directors joined, one from the restaurant industry, one with a background in nonprofit governance. Carol was formalized as a voting board member. I was appointed CFO and given full signing authority on all accounts over $5,000. My compensation was adjusted to market rate, retroactive to the beginning of the year. My mother and I did not speak for 6 weeks after the board meeting. When we did, it was in her kitchen, which was strange and ordinary at the same time. She made coffee. She didn't apologize directly, but she asked me how I had learned to hold so much without breaking, and I told her I'd learned it from watching my grandmother get up at 5 in the morning for 30 years without anyone thanking her. My mother was quiet for a long time after that. I don't know if she fully understood what had happened or what she had allowed to happen. I think she understood some of it. I think the rest will come to her slowly, in the middle of the night, the way certain truths do. I moved into a house I bought myself, in Grandview, 3 miles from the original Harmon kitchen diner, where my grandmother once stood at a griddle for 8 hours straight to cover for a cook who called in sick. The commute to the main office is 12 minutes. I don't resent the commute. The company is in its strongest financial position in 11 years. We renegotiated the school district contracts and expanded the catering arm. We opened a 10th location in the short north last spring, and the opening week numbers were the best we'd ever recorded. The regional director position is currently held by someone who came up through our kitchen management program and knows every vendor by name. My grandmother came to the soft opening. She sat at a corner table and drank decaf, and watched people eat, and she looked exactly like someone who had gotten what she wanted. She told me afterward that she'd been afraid for a long time that the business would end badly eaten from the inside, she said, by people who wanted what it represented without understanding what it cost. She said she'd put her faith in the one person she'd seen actually pay the cost, year after year, without being asked. She said, "I knew you'd know when." I keep a copy of the original shareholder document in my desk, in a frame my grandmother gave me. Beside it is a photo from the day I signed the new governance documents, surrounded by Carol and the 2 independent directors and Patricia, who is not a sentimental person, but who agreed to the photo without complaint. Clients sometimes see the frame and ask about it. I tell them it's a reminder that the most important legal document in any family business is the one that nobody thought to read, and that the most dangerous person in any room is the quiet one who has been keeping records. If you've ever done the work and watched someone else take the credit, please subscribe and share this with someone who needs to hear it. I share stories about family, loyalty, and the kind of strength that doesn't always look like strength from the outside. Comment below. I read every single one. Because sometimes the most important thing is knowing that someone else has been in that room and walked out of it and built something better on the other side.